I I was just making sure that people could hear us
Oh,
and
okay.
see us.
Okay.
And I
Do we?
think that we may have just been talking to ourselves the whole time.
Really? Oh, fun.
Oh, we've just gone live 15 seconds ago.
Oh my God.
Dude, we just crushed the beginning of this, but it's fine. And we'll go back.
Oh, we'll go back.
I'm just going to see just really quick, and I can edit this out later when I post this, but I just want to make sure that everybody can hear and see us, and if they are going to be able to hear from the beginning or hear from right now.
These are good
So,
questions.
hi, Paul. Hi, Mitch. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Savannah, Max, Olga, can you guys hear us now, or are you starting at the beginning? Okay, you can hear us now. I just can't tell if they're watching it from the beginning. Tell me
Hmm.
if, say, mouse.
Are you talking to me?
All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. What's so crazy is that Aaron and I have just been crushing it for like 8 minutes by ourselves, but it's no worry. We can start over. I'm so happy that you guys are here and can hear and see us right now. You guys, I'm just so excited because Aaron Steinberg is one of the most important people in my life. I just gave this intro, and Aaron, I made you blush. I'm going to make you blush again
I'm
because,
probably still blushing.
yeah, everybody that I was telling about this interview, when I try to explain like who you are to my friends, to my husband and I, to my group of friends, you've become this piece of our lives that is like this rock. Like whenever life gets bumpy, we know we always have you to turn to. For those of you guys who haven't listened to the Risk Everyday podcast before, Aaron Steinberg is a relationship coach. Also, a few years ago, for those of you who are poker players, he also co-ran and helped guide a stable of poker players back in 2014. So he's well familiar with the game. He used to also play poker for a living, and now he is doing so many great things to help guide people through relationships. And I'm so excited to have you, especially in this crazy time.
Thanks, Christy. Well, you're right. Now I feel hot again. So it worked. Thank you for that sweet introduction. I'm really happy to be with you.
Oh man, so we were just talking about the game and Neil Strauss, and I even brought this book because he was like, okay, so for those of you guys who haven't heard of Neil Strauss and the game is this incredible book about how this writer who like used to profile rock and roll artists, he infiltrated the pickup artist community and became a well-known pickup artist himself. And then he had orgies, did all the things, and then he tried to have a successful monogamous relationship. And this book is about how he kind of came to terms with what was stopping him from being happy and committed, and when he found himself unable to stay monogamous. And we were just talking, and because your answer was so good, I just really want to share with everybody who's on now. As a relationship coach, can you share with us your thoughts on the game and the truth?
Yeah. So the game I'll say short because I read it when I was in college and I was like, oh yeah, this is so cool. Like I'm gonna learn how to be better with women or whatever nonsense. And that was very brief. It had no desire to go down any sort of pickup artistry road. So that was a piece of entertainment for me. Um, but the truth is one of my favorite books, and the reason it's one of my favorite books is because I think there's this gap that I am trying to fill, and I think you're trying to fill, and I think a lot of people in our sphere are trying to fill, where on one hand, there's this really, really valuable relationship advice that is kind of inaccessible. And for me, like right now, I'm reading this book called Attachment and Psychotherapy, which is about attachment theory and how, as a practitioner, you use it to work with couples. And attachment theory is like the premier body of research about relationships, our relationships to all people, our relationships to our family, and then our relationships to our romantic partners. So I'm reading this book, but it's like super, super dense, right? Like no person who's just interested in relationships is going to pick up this book. It's like a textbook, right? So there's this gap between that kind of stuff, which has the super valuable information about things that would be really good for people to know about relationships and well-being and everything. And then there's the stuff that's really accessible, which in my opinion, for the most part, is total garbage, right? It's just like these stupid tropes or platitudes about like always do this or always do that. Like my brothers
Just be
and
yourself.
my brothers and I used to do this thing where we go through Cosmo and start like picking apart all of the relationship advice and like doing our own, like make sure to like scratch his back hair really furiously. Like men love that, we just like go there and say all this random crap. So anyway, I love the truth because I think it fills that gap so nicely. Like Neil Strauss is such a good storyteller. And I think it's beautiful the way he talks about these really fundamental principles of relationships in an accessible way through his own story. Like, for example, that he's a love avoidant and Ingrid is a love addict, right? Like, I don't necessarily use that language in my practice or the way that I think about relationships, but it's close to something I use. And just to illustrate that concept that two people can have different relationship styles, right? That sort of have nothing to do with each other. And the ability, like the impact that even something that little of like one person is going to be more like gripping and chasing and the other person wants to love more at a distance, and understanding that dynamic can make a huge impact, right? And also I love how he just goes through his childhood and explains how those different pieces contribute to who he ends up becoming. And those things are very simple, like in the way that he goes over them, right? But they're also so profound and important, and are things that, like, I don't know, I hate it when people say things like that nobody knows about, but it's like, it's just something that's not, there's not an outlet for it in an easily accessible, sort of fun, entertaining way like he provides. And I think he's just he's clearly such a good writer and so thoughtful. So I just love that book so much. It had a huge impact on me also personally.
Yeah, same. I suggest it to people all the time. And when we started working together in, like, I think 2014, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I had only made that step because I was in a place in my life, in my marriage, where I didn't really have another choice. Like, it was just a like do or die time. And I remember how long it took me to realize, through many conversations and gentle questioning by you and gentle, coaching, is that like, oh my gosh, it's not just so black and white, like he's wrong, I'm right, or like this is just how it is. It's like we have our own perceptions, we have our own fears, and they play into the status of our relationship. And you mentioned love avoidant and love addict, which is, like you said, like you don't use those words, but I definitely identified or it resonated with me, because when I thought about back then in my relationship with Andrew, part of the reason why we were in such conflict is that I was a love addict and he was a love avoidant. Where basically it just felt like he was afraid of losing his own freedom and I was afraid of being abandoned. So like no matter what happened, I was gonna like, you're not leaving me. And the more I was like, you're not leaving me, the more he was like, oh my gosh, I can't breathe. Like can and it feels so good to know that we aren't alone. Like it's not just like this is only our situation, which we can often feel that way because we don't generally share, and it takes we don't generally have relationship coaches. I mean, a lot of people have not gotten to take a deep dive into how they view relationships. So it feels like, oh, I'm the only one. Unless books like this, conversations with you, it just makes such a difference in being able to tackle our own stories when we're like, oh, it's not just me.
Yeah, and to feel normal. Like I remember at the end of a session at the beginning of this week, one of my clients said, it was a couple, and he said, Aaron, can you just tell us that we're not alone? And it was sort of like a lighthearted comment, but it really wasn't. You know, it's like there's something really relaxing to just know that like there's commonalities between the issues that people face in relationships. Like, what is a relationship even supposed to feel like
Yeah.
and be like? Like, one of the things I fight a lot, not like literally I'm fighting, but just in kind of the way that relationship norms seem to have progressed, is just this sort of fairy tale mentality. And most people don't identify with, oh, I have like a fairy tale mentality, because people think that means some sort of like airy fairy, oh, I'm just going to fall in love and like, and it's going to be sunshine and rainbows. But that is actually really ingrained in the way that people think, in the sense that we still generally feel like the issue in relationships is meeting the right person,
Mm.
as opposed to actually what comes after you meet the person that you meet, which is actually the challenge of relationships,
Yeah.
right? Meeting a person that you're more or less compatible enough with can be very hard and very like taxing. And I don't want to downplay, especially right now, like online dating is an absolute mess, you know, from what I can tell. And it just feels like people are suffering so much. But like, in theory, that's actually the easier part of the thing. And you know, for people to understand that like, oh, like we're coming up against the same issues over and over and over again, but it's not just us, that's huge for people, you know. And to understand like, even just the idea that, as you're saying, it's like you being more love addicty and Andrew being more love avoidanty isn't personal to you as people. It's not like he's like, I don't love you, Christy,
Right.
right? He's like, this is how this is like my style that I've come in with, that now we need to work with together.
Oh, there's so much I want to break down and go into with what you said. But before we do that, I think what you said in the beginning, because I know a lot of people are really struggling in quarantine, and I think it's sort of accelerating whatever was happening in relationships. We're kind of like in marriage, or your boyfriend or your girlfriend, like these conflicts seem to be unavoidable when we can't leave the house. And so I know a lot of people are taking this time to really work. And I guess I guess if we could just tell people now, you're not alone. It's okay.
Seriously, I cannot tell you how busy I am. It's wild, you know, like people are just, you know, rightfully so, right? There's so much suffering happening right now in so many ways, but relationally, like, especially, I think people underestimate like the impact of outside circumstances on the way you perceive each other,
Hmm.
right? Like when you're worried about money, right? Like you are going to naturally just see your partner as more difficult than you would otherwise see them. You know, like that's just going to happen. Or if you're worried about anything, really, if you're worried about your health and safety, like everything that they do that feels like it's coming up against, you know, rubbing up against that fear is just, you know, it's just sort of an immediate, it can just be an immediate like flare up. And so it's so easy at a time like this for people to be struggling with relationships of any kind, especially romantic relationships, especially the people that you're living with, right? And having to like coordinate all these extra precautions and guidelines with, like it's so intense. And a lot of people have had massive shifts in their jobs, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, or even not having a job. I mean, that's one thing we've been dealing with. Liz is in corporate events, so when the hell is there going to be another corporate event? We don't know. So there's this massive shift in the roles that we're each playing in our marriage and our family with our children. And there's so much to navigate, you know. So you are not alone, I promise you.
Yes, we're all in it. And when you said, there's different situations to navigate, I was talking to a few of my friends, and they're also in that place. Some of them are in new life situations, not only because of COVID, but maybe also because of like moving in together or getting married, and they're taking on, like seeing each other in different ways. And whenever there's a new set of circumstances, there's a new set of fears, and you're going to experience your partner maybe butting up against some, belief or something in them that you haven't seen before. And so right now I was just thinking, like, and I was sharing, like, Andrew and I are in like a better place than we've ever been. We rarely fight, and when we do, it's really not that. It's we navigate through it pretty quickly because we put in a lot of work with you for a lot of years to get here. But it was messy for a long time, and it was dark and ugly at times. But right now, we're in a good place. But I know that as life circumstances change, as we head into different chapters of our lives, and I'm assuming that when we have children, it's going to be a whole nother thing, that we're gonna have conflict again, and it's going to be great, and we're going to figure that out. But it's like when you talk about the fairy tale ideas that we have, and it's like we think that if we aren't hunky dory all the time, or the way that we see relationships on social media and the people who we admire who look like they never fight,
Mhm.
then we're doing it wrong. But no, we're not. I mean,
Yeah,
we're doing it wrong if we avoid it or like, make it bad or wrong, but it's just the journey.
it is. Yeah. By the way, I just need to call this out because I'm feeling very self-conscious about how much I'm touching my face, and my AC in my office broke. It's like 85 degrees in here. So I apologize for having poor video form etiquette here, but it's just so damn hot in my office.
Oh no, can you open a window?
My office doesn't have openable windows, which
You
was
need
a
a
very,
fan.
I
You
know,
need
I
like a
know,
beauty fan right in front of you so it can
I know.
just,
Shh. Yeah,
yeah.
just cool down. Yeah, exactly. But in any case, yeah, one of the things you said made me think about, like, and this seems like a good venue to say this because it's just something that's very important for me. Like one of my messages that I feel really strongly about is about compatibility. And just the way that I feel like people misunderstand compatibility. Like, obviously, compatibility, there's, like different spiritual beliefs or religious beliefs or worldviews or different places you want to live, or a lot of different intentions for having a family or how you deal with each other's family. Like, these things are really tough to navigate, and I think are totally in the realm of compatibility. But the thing that happens for people as they navigate these challenges that I deal with in my office multiple times a day is everyone, like, when you're in a relationship, you come up against the same conversation and the same issue over and over and over and over again. And it's so easy at that point to think, this must not be the right person for me,
Mm.
because why can't they meet me where I want to be met? Why can't they give me what I want? Right? Whether, that's more space or more closeness or any of the other possibilities of the things that people want in relationships. And I think it's really important to understand that in most cases, that's not actually a matter of compatibility. It's just a matter of not actually having the right principles and communication skills and tools to deal with it. And it makes me so sad when I see people breaking up that actually, I mean, who am I to say this, right? Like, who should be breaking up together? But just I've been doing this for 10 years now, and I've seen a lot of relationships go a lot of different directions, and you kind of see what works and what doesn't work. And it's like, it's so sad to me when people break up and then repeat the exact same thing with like four more people, right? And then and eventually most people realize, like, oh, this is me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this isn't about them, right? Like, that's a realization that a lot of people end up having. But a lot of times, like, you miss out on these relationships that could have been really beautiful, right? Like, how easy would it have been for you and Andrew to throw in the towel? Like, it would have been so easy, you
Yeah,
know?
so easy. And there were many times where he would be like, why are you never, you're just like never listening? And what I was thinking was just like, well, why can't, yes, I am, first of all. And like, why can't you just get your own shit together or whatever? And when you said like meeting you, why can't this person just meet me where I want to be met? And in my mind at that point, when he said, why can't you just be here, or why aren't you listening? I kept thinking like, well, why do you need me? I am hearing you, or whatever. And it would have been so easy to just be like, well, I just need someone who is more independent or more tough or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
When I would have entered the next more relationships without being able to slow down, connect, and really listen from a place of like not making everything he's saying about me, which I did, and what I wouldn't have like communicated or been able to, just be with unless I was like, maybe it's not him. Maybe what he's saying is that I am lacking this ability to just be with someone and hear someone without, like, if he tells me, like, Christy, like, oh man, there's like I can't even think of an example, but I always like had this through this filter of like he's criticizing me or like I'm not doing good enough instead of just listening. But I would have repeated that forever. And the gift was that working through this with someone who I've chosen to be, who I said I was going to be with forever, gave me like the biggest gift was that now I'm not such an asshole listener.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. It's always both, right? Like one of my favorite, I think I find this funnier than other people do. But one of my favorite things that I say to people in session is I say everyone's a pain in the ass. So like people come into my office and they're like, they're too distant and they never listen to me and they don't pay attention to me and prioritize every other thing. And if they were not so distant, then we would be fine. And then the other person takes a turn and goes, they're too needy, they're too clingy, they're too sensitive about everything. Everything's blown out of proportion. If only they were just stronger, everything would be fine. And the answer is always, you're both, probably right?
Mm-hmm.
You are probably too needy, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you are probably too distant, right? And you are too sensitive to someone, as a distant person, you're too sensitive to someone relying on you. And as a needy person, you are too sensitive to any hint of distance between you. And I'm not saying that as like a way of being critical of people. It's a way of like, let's just turn toward ourselves and face reality. Why is it so hard to just be like, yeah, I'm sensitive. I can be super sensitive,
Yeah.
right? Not as like a self-defeating thing or whatever, but just kind of, I hate the word own, but there's really no better word for it. It's just owning like, yeah, starting out, it might not even be your fault, right? You might have had like a super terrible upbringing and your family like super rejected you. And so obviously you're going to feel like this lack and, you feel really needy of like whatever it might be, security or approval or whatever. Like, I'm not blaming you for that, but let's call a spade,
Yeah.
right? Start where we're starting and go, okay, well, what do we need to do about this? Is there a way I can become stronger without subjugating my need for security, right? Is there a way that I can come closer to you without, subjugating my need for my own space and sense of self, right? Like that's when it gets really interesting as you start to collaborate on, wow, these two things seem really in opposition to each other. What if we don't fight about it and actually work as a team to try to figure out some sort of way of working through this, right? Like that is the best place from which to operate a relationship.
I think that there's two things that saying that does. One is, first of all, hopefully, it makes people laugh when you say that because it's like, yeah, I mean, okay, we're in a serious relationship and we're trying to figure things out, but also it's kind of funny that we're both pain in the ass, and it makes so much sense.
Right. Yeah. I teach a class called Baby Proofing Your Relationship at a parenting nonprofit in San Francisco called Natural Resources. Just want to give them a shout out because they're wonderful. But in any case, in my class, I frame that in terms of like, because it's all about, your relationship as co-parents, not about actual parenting. But I say that in the framework of like, one of the pitfalls is acting like children. Right. And it's like everyone has a way in which we act like children, right? Like we're not this uniform together adult, of our age person only, right? There are moments when provoked in a certain way, you're damn right I'm going to act like a 4-year-old, right? I'm going to go right back and I'm going to be 4-year-old Aaron or 8-year-old Aaron or whatever. And I don't know, I love when people can just be like, this isn't that big of a deal. Like I can say like, I'm being super needy right now. And Liz can be like, yeah, I'm doing that thing where I put a wall up and I can say that to her, and there's a way through that. It's just awesome.
Yeah, it
Sorry, I'm
totally.
getting really pumped up because
I know.
I love this stuff.
I know, me too. It's so good. And actually just the other day, or actually, well first, there's so many things. In one of your Facebook live messages about relationships in quarantine, you were talking about how it's very often where both couples will think they're doing more than the other couple, which that if they were both true, it's not really that's
It's
not
not
they
possible.
can't be true. And um and Andrew and I had kind of an argument about that. And I was just like, and then I just realized that I just wanted to be like acknowledged because sometimes, as we've talked about, I can be a little sensitive. And then I was just like, I'm sorry. I'm just being a baby right now. And then he was like, yeah, you are. It's okay. And he gave me a hug. And then we're like, we're
Mhm.
fine.
Yeah, yeah. I know that concept is sorry. I don't know if you were going to go somewhere else with that, but I'll just briefly say that concept. This is like one of the most fascinating points of like unofficial research for me is how is it that both people feel like they're contributing more than they're receiving. This is like one of the most common things that I come up against in working with people in relationships. It's also just one of the most common viewpoints of people, interestingly.
Mm,
Like if you think about when people go to therapy and they come out of therapy, most regularly the thing that people get out of their sessions is something like I'm just I'm like breaking my own boundaries and needs to please someone else, and I need to have better boundaries for myself and stand up for myself more and whatever. Like, how is it possible that this is true for every single person? Right?
right.
Like that
Right.
can't be true objectively, right? But it is true. Like I've actually never met a person who doesn't believe that, which is
Wow.
very strange. Right.
Fascinating.
And it might just be the circles I travel in where I'm with all these like sensitive working on yourself people, including myself. And I like what I do for a living. But I just find that so fascinating. Like I try to unpack all the time, like, how does that happen? I'm like this is like one of the things I want to come out with like a template for of like, what do you do with this and why does this happen? And, I don't know. I just find it fascinating.
Well, I was just writing the other day one of these stories for my book, and so in your like case study or whatever. I don't know if this helps. It might on the inside give um, some perspective on it because I remember when Andrew and I were rebuilding our marriage, I had my own story of how I was trying way harder, how I was the one who was putting in all the work and I was committed and he wasn't. And then my friend, I was complaining about Andrew one day and I was talking to my friend on the phone and she was like, okay, well, I have a challenge for you. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. And she told me to write on a post it for 30 days something that I love and respected about Andrew and give it to him every day. And I was like, yeah, sure. Because, like, again, I had this story. Of course I would do it. I can do a challenge. I can do that for 30 days. And then it was like, the next morning, I ripped off a new post it, I wrote something, and I gave it to him. And then around 7 or 8 days in, we got in a fight, and I did not want to write that post it. And I was like, but I have this story that I'm trying harder and I can't write a post it for 30 days. And I say that I love him, but really in this moment, I don't want to find something that I can say that I love about him, which there should be very many if I say I'm trying so hard. And what I obviously in that moment, what I realized was that like my story was just protecting me because I could come away with all the sympathy, all this like not feeling guilty if I kept to this story that I was trying harder. And I could just blame it on him if it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So once
Totally.
I was like able to let that go or at least confront it, like maybe this isn't true. Maybe maybe what I have made up about it is just trying to keep myself from hurting or something, then I could move through it and saw all the ways that he was trying also.
Yeah. Well, I have a current working theory on it if you'd like to hear it.
Oh, of course.
Okay. So here's my current working theory. So I've gotten really into lately the concept of dismissive listening, meaning like the ways in which when someone says something to us, we dismiss what they're saying, not even if it's not our intention. Like a sort of a fun example of this is like a lot of people are taught when someone says something to relate it to something about yourself, right? That's good listening, right? The goal of that is obviously to make the person feel not alone, right? Like that's the positive intention of that. But a lot of times the feeling of it is you just dismissed what I was saying and then you made it about your thing, right? So that feels very dismissive. There's a lot of these that I've written out in like my journals and stuff I'm working on. One is something I call, the worst one is debating, right? Where people go, you say something, yeah, but this point, right? And then they say, yeah, but this, right? And you go back and forth and debate. And basically you're implying to the other person, that's not the way you feel isn't right. And you shouldn't feel that way. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's others of these, like being overly positive, like how could you feel that way, you're so amazing, or like bulldozing someone, like they say something vulnerable and then you're like, but what about all the other times, blah blah blah. Or translating what they say, where they say, oh man, I was reading this book, oh, there's these children's books called Pigeon Wants Something, and the pigeon asks for a puppy, and then you're supposed to say no to the pigeon, and then the pigeon goes, oh fine, you don't want me to be happy then. Right. And like we do that in relationships all the time. So anyway, my theory is basically that both people try really hard to take the feedback and accommodate what the other person is asking for. But what we get focused on and fixated on are the times when either in action or verbally, what we're asking for is dismissed. Right. So it comes like we go out and we have to come back around because we hit what feels like a wall. And I think it has something to do with our brain just focusing more on negativity for survival purposes. So what stands out to us are all the times that we're dismissed. So the story becomes, I'm trying, right? Here are all the ways in which I'm accommodating what you're asking for, and you're dismissing me, when the other person is similarly not seeing all the ways in which you're trying, and similarly seeing all the ways in which you're dismissing them, because no person does this perfectly. We all dismiss each other, right? I don't know, but I've never seen someone not dismiss someone, at least in some way. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that's why I think it's happening. It's kind of like you're both going toward each other, feeling like you're getting pushed back against, and then turning back in on yourself, trying again, it doesn't work, trying again. Right. And so that just becomes this idea in your head that you see all the times you're trying and also all the times you're being dismissed. Right. And you don't see all the times you're dismissing and all the times that they're trying. That's what I think is happening and why people have that feeling.
That's so good. So good. I can't wait for your next book. It's going to be so good.
It's not going to be a book. I'm working on a course.
Is that the one that you are putting in beta right now?
Yeah, so this is a really cool thing for me because I have a lot of fear. It's like, it's really easy for me to do these kinds of conversations, right? Because you're provoking me and I'm provoking you, and we can feed off each other, and it's safer. But when you write something or when you create content, like it has to be perfectly understandable and supportive and actionable, right? So there's so much margin for error in coaching sessions that is not there in creating content. And so I've finally pushed myself to take on this challenge of what has become really turning myself inside out and very clearly getting all of the principles and tools and philosophies organized and explained clearly and in some sort of digestible way. So that's a massive project for me, not because I'm some super genius with like all these things, but because I have trouble being that clear. And so I'm working with a woman who's helping me, who speaks Aaron very well and is like, this is what you're trying to say, as a good copy editor. So that thing that I released in beta is a draft of one of maybe 5 sections of this, right? So that thing is the draft of how to actually organize the way you feel about something in a way that you can then communicate it to your partner without it being attacking. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's like this balance, which is really important to people, of people feel like if I accept their perspective or hear them or, let go of my own thing or whatever, I'm subjugating my own needs and my own self-worth and everything. So it's a really interesting thing to think about. How do I express myself in a way that honors what I really feel and doesn't bury what I feel, but also is not an attack to my partner, that's actually accessible? So that's what that thing was. It's like a draft of one of 5 parts, basically. And I'm going to do them in parts because it's too much otherwise. So
Yeah, it's a big
that one I'm going to
project.
do first. I'm going to do that one first. And I'm going to do one about listening. And then I'm going to do about your individual journey as a person in a relationship. And then I'm going to do this thing about collaboration, which is kind of what I was talking about how you face things that feel like they're in opposition to each other.
I'm so excited for this and to be able to show people how they can take this course or whenever you get it done, because and I know we talked about this before. I mean, I just think that your work is so important and we don't learn. I mean, it's so crazy how, in this first, when you talk about how do we communicate what we're feeling to our partner in a way that is connecting, and why don't we learn this in school? Like, it's crazy. We don't learn this anywhere. And now as adults, we have the opportunity to invest in how we have these conversations and how we have relationships. And actually, before we move on, I mean, every time I talk to you, I want to go in every single direction. And it's so good. So I'm just going to say we'll have to do this again sometime because I know we won't get everything in.
Amen.
But, Andrew and I were talking about how much we've invested time and money-wise into personal growth and our marriage, and it is a lot. And of course, it's so worth it. And we
Are you
wouldn't
going to
have.
ask for a refund? Is that where this is going?
I would give you, and I will continue to give you all the money and all the business that I could. I wish I
Is
could
that
pay
what
you
you brought in?
more. I wish I could pay you more. It's worth way more than that we have ever given. But it's interesting because it's very easy to convince people at large to invest in ways where they see themselves making more money. So like people invest $10,000 in a business course or coach or whatever. And I think that the reason we want to be successful or make a lot of money in the first place is because we want to be loved, or we want to feel, have great relationships and intimacy. And I know that because every single song ever made is about love, not business. I mean, some are about making money and stuff, but what I'm saying is that it's the thing we want most, and I think it's so great that you're making this course to make it, one, more accessible, a great place where people can start, both because it's scary to be face to face or on the phone with someone.
Yeah.
And if you want to start somewhere and you want to be in the comfort of your own home and work through things at your own pace, it's going to be such a great place to start.
That's exactly like I'm my goal, and this is, I don't even know how to even explain this well, but my goal is to somehow replicate the experience of being with me while not being with me, right? So it's intended not to be 100% didactic where I'm like imparting information on you. I also want it to be experiential. I want you to be, working on stuff. It's like short video, worksheet, journal, thought process, short video, like it's intended to be more of an experience. And you're exactly right. Like for me, one of my, like the way that I want to do my career, like my mission, right? I very recently kind of had something that just like felt like, yeah, this is what I'm about right now in this point in my life. It might change, like, I don't know. But what feels motivating to me right now is like, I want every single person who wants really high quality relationship support and advice and therapy or whatever, whatever version you want, education, whatever version you want to call it, to have that available, right? Right now, this work that I do, it's a luxury item, right? I mean, I work on a sliding scale. I try to be really accessible as much as I can and not have money be a barrier. But bottom line is it's a luxury item. It's very important. but it's, and it actually isn't a luxury item in some way because getting divorced is way more expensive. But in any case, point being, that's hugely important to me to have something really high quality be largely accessible. Like I'm on the train of, I want this to be super high quality, super low cost, have it be something that's very actionable, right? Where it's like you're implementing this into your life immediately, right? And that it's understandable, obviously, so that you can take action. Like that really, really matters to me. And this thing that you're saying, this is part of the reason this is in parts, because I was going through this with my support marketing copy editor person. We were realizing that like people seeking help with relationships is not one avatar or whatever the word is in online business speak, right? It's like there's a lot of different people that walk through my door. There's one person in the couple whose partner doesn't want to work on it and is trying to look for ways to be more satisfied themselves. There's like newbie couple that doesn't really have any problems but is both willing to acquire some more skills. There's people like relationship nerds like you and me who are like, give me it all. Like, give me I want to know all the things. Right. And there's people who are just like eating shit, right? Who are like, am I allowed to swear on here?
Yeah.
Okay. There are people who are eating shit who are like, we're ready to come into your office together. We have no problem telling each other the truth, but we can't get anywhere because we're constantly at each other's throats. Right. So there's just a lot of different needs. And so I ideally want to have something where it's like, you can go through this the way that I presented it to you and go through all these little steps, or you can be like, we're at like hardcore, we have no problem yelling at each other, but we can't get anywhere stage. Okay, choose your own adventure, go to module 4.
Yeah.
I'm at, my partner doesn't really want to work on it, but how do I make sure I'm taking care of myself in our relationship and not pushing my own needs aside? You go to module 1 about speaking, right? How do you speak without making your partner feel attacked, right? Whatever, Andrew tells you suck at listening. You go to module 2. Why do I suck at listening? Right? Like, I want that possibility. I think that's just a cool thing for people to be able to have. It's not like a one size fits all experience.
I can't wait. And for those who are listening or watching and they want to be able to know when that comes out, is there some place that you can direct them, or can they follow you on Twitter or Instagram so that they
Yeah,
can be updated?
sure. The place where I'm most active is Facebook. Well, also, I mean, first of all, my website will always have everything, which is aaronfs.com. I go professionally by Aaron FS. I don't know. It depends on what point you meet me, whether there's a Steinberg in there or not, but aaronfs.com. And in my Facebook is /AaronFS education.
Okay.
That's where I'm most active. I also have an Instagram, which is Aaron_FS, but like at this point, all my sort of professional things are through Facebook. So that would be where to keep up with stuff. I'm, as we chatted about, it's like I have a full-time coaching load right now, in addition to working on this and in addition to being a father of 2 and everything else. So I don't have a launch date. I'm kind of doing
Yeah.
this my unorthodox little bit at a time way.
Well, I know that everything that you put out in this, and especially how much your heart is in this, you just want to make it as high quality as you can. And sometimes you just, especially when you haven't done this before, there's no way of knowing exactly how long it will take. But along the way, I hope we can connect. And, whenever have a new section out or something, and there's something you want to talk about, or given the time as we move through this quarantine, then I would love to continue connecting with you. And for the last couple minutes, I just want to go through the chat to make sure that I haven't missed any questions that people have put in the live chat. First of all, Esteban Champion, what's up? He says, the honesty practice, this guy. Yeah, if you haven't gotten it already or heard, I can't remember if we said that at the beginning of this podcast where we were just talking to ourselves and not live, but Aaron is also an author, and he wrote the book The Honesty Practice, which you guys can find on Amazon.com. Let's see, who else? Of course, Olga's in the chat. God, I love that girl. Paul Thompson, what's up? Let's see. Okay.
I'm also happy to take any questions if there's people who want to ask questions now. I don't know what your time frame for this is, but I have some more time.
Absolutely. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask? Just drop it here in the live chat. This is interesting. It looks as though there are a couple of people debating on something about love. Hold on. Let's see if I can.
Oh, cool.
Value is subjective. Generally, people place greater value on the things. Oh, okay. Now people are jumping in, so it's hard. I lost what I was just reading. Oh. Generally, people place greater value on the things they provide versus the things provided. I think he said that when we were talking about how people think they give more than the other or others.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never heard anyone say that before, that people place more value on the things they provide versus what is provided. That is, I'm gonna have to mull that over. I don't know. I'm curious where that person, if that's an idea they came up with, or if that's something they got from some research somewhere, because that would be a fascinating keystone of this whole conversation that I'm having with myself about why people feel like they're giving more than they're receiving.
Someone else, or maybe it's the same person, they said, is marriage an institution worth saving?
I think it depends on what you mean by marriage. Like for me, I don't particularly care about whether or not we're talking about legal marriage. For me, I don't care if we save the legality of marriage or not. That's not really of consequence to me. To me, that's just kind of an emotional choice of like, I want to know that I'm have that or I don't. In terms of whether or not we should save the institution of long-term, monogamous committed relationships, I would say absolutely. I am not pro monogamy over non-monogamy. I think that some people, I don't know how much of it is nature versus nurture, but I think that both relationship structures can be very, very healthy, and they are things that are naturally desired by people. I think the idea that everyone's truly non-monogamous is absolute bullshit. And I think the idea that everyone is truly monogamous and it's just some sort of trauma that got in your way is also absolute bullshit. So for me, again, it's like, I think where a question like that comes from is people suffer so hard in relationships, right? Like I read a statistic, like 17% of people are truly satisfied with their romantic relationships. If that's true, that's astonishing, right? And that's like, of course, why would we want to save so much suffering? But that's like why I do what I do, because I feel like that's a matter of skills and perspective as opposed to a matter of a flaw in the machinery, which is where most people go with it. So like, I mean, Christy, you and I both feel this way. We both, I'm pretty sure you and Andrew are monogamous.
Yeah.
Me and my wife are monogamous. And, I mean, that's very blanket. Like, obviously I have really close female friendships and whatever, but in any case, we both feel like so happy in our marriages. And that's not just a bullshit thing that I'm saying. Like, I will tell you, there have been moments where we were both suffering so hard. Like after our second kid was born, my wife and I were struggling. It's not always easy. And I don't pretend that it is, but I'm so happily married. So I don't feel like I'm special and I found the perfect mate. Like I feel like we know how to work on our relationship and have gotten support from another counselor and whatever. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but I feel like it's necessary to break it down like that. Emphatically, yes, it should be saved. And everyone, and here's the thing. Sorry, I need to say something else about this. Right now, there is this utter nonsense going around about self-love, right? So like the new age thing is you got to love yourself and you shouldn't need to get your needs met from other people and blah, 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 blah. And obviously that comes from a good place, because it's like you see people who are like, can't handle not being in a relationship, or like will be in abusive relationships and not leave. And like in those types of situations, obviously it's like whoa, like you need to kind of have some more self-respect here. Like, you need to kind of be able to be on your own and stuff like that. But like we evolved to be connected to each other. There's no question about this scientifically. Like we are evolved to be dependent for each other on security and safety. Right. So the idea that like everyone could be or would be fine on their own and like that really were just effective it's the absolute opposite. Right. It's like, yeah, I mean, both things are true, but it's like that is a fundamental human machinery to be dependent on people. So you can't, it's like the question isn't, should we throw that away? The question is, what the fuck do we do with this thing that's just true? Right. How do we best deal with the fact that that's what we're going to be drawn to?
Oh, that's no, it's such a great answer because someone also asked, is the future of relationships polyamory? So the very detailed answer and I do completely agree with you. Going back, because I know that the second part of your answer was a little bit, on another topic, but like both, I think are just such the opportunity to, I think that it takes, sorry, I'm getting lost. There's so many questions here. Hold on. And I want to
Well,
make sure
I'll
to
just
get them
say
right.
real quick, the future, I would guess the future of relationships is more non-monogamous than it currently is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that would be my guess. Like a lot of people have affairs. So clearly, I mean, affairs are much more complicated than your actual sexual relationship style, but I would guess it'll be more non-monogamy, more open non-monogamy, right? It'll just hopefully become more accepted, but certainly not across the board. I think that's absolutely not true.
Awesome. Um, the Badger says, Aaron, take your shirt off. Maybe he wants to see you topless, or maybe he just really,
Oh, because I'm so hot. Maybe he's worried about how hot I
yeah,
am
maybe he's just
because
worried.
I'm just sweating profusely right now through this interview. Thanks, Badger. Whichever way you meant it, I appreciate it.
um, Max has a question for you.
Is that my
Max,
brother?
yes, your brother. I think it's really easy to intellectually understand that you are a pain in the ass than to really get it. It is way
Mhm.
easier to see our partner as a pain in the ass. What's a good way to get some perspective on yourself instead of blaming your partner?
Well, I mean, so if you well to get perspective on yourself, I would say is in the same realm as intellectually understanding it. So first step would just be awareness, right? It's like if that is true, that I'm also a pain in the ass, I need to figure out what ways in which that is true. The best person to ask for that sort of feedback is your romantic partner. You can also ask your friends or your family, right? It's just like it's not who you are, right? So this is another answer to your question is take it out of the realm of about who you are as opposed to the habits that you have, right? So but ask your people like what do I do that's hard for you, right? Like what are the habits I have that are hard for you, right? So one thing, and also just being self-reflective, right? So first you have to acquire the information, right? And the second thing is then practicing. I think a lot of it is practicing how we communicate, right? So it's like in the middle of an argument or even after when the dust has settled, are you coming back and saying, hey, I'm sorry. I know I blew that out of proportion. Like I really blew that out of proportion. And that must have been really hard for you, right? Because the more that you can just out yourself, the less weight that it has. The reason things carry, so this goes, now I'm going to circle back to the thing I said in the middle. The reason things carry emotional weight is because they intersect with our identity, right? So basically, what I mean by that is your behaviors become about who you are as opposed to what you do, right? So you need to continue to practice not being as attached, like separating those two things from each other. Like I can see that I get overly sensitive without having to mean I'm a terrible person or I'm an awful partner or whatever, bullshit you think about yourself, right? So that working on your sense of identity and your resilience so that it's not so fragile for you when someone implies something about a bad habit you have or a negative impact you have, right, is massive. And the way that you do that is A is identifying it, right? And just practice it. Like there's one way where this is kind of like meditation. It's just like, can I sit with the discomfort of just acknowledging like, I feel like in this, I feel like I suck. Like I feel like I fucked up, right? And just kind of sitting with that and not having it drag you out. The other thing is just communicating that and outing yourself, because identity is relative to other people. It's also relative to our own sense of self, but it's relative to other people. So if you're able to call out when you calm down, you know what, I was just I was so overly needy and you had so much other stuff to take care of, and I was like interrupting you and begging for your attention. That must have really sucked. It decreases the weight, right? It just decreases the like fragility of the ego and the emotional weight of that feeling that feels really hard to deal with in the moment.
Uh, I would. It made me think of something that came up for Andrew and I would just like love to give an example. You could tell me if it's sort of
Uh-huh.
what you're talking about, which is for so long I've been I find myself have found my self-worth in the things that I do and the things that I achieve and contribute, especially in relationship. And right now with quarantine, I haven't been playing live poker and I haven't really wanted to play online. So Andrew's been playing 12, 15 hours a day playing online while I have been doing other creative ventures that aren't making any money currently. And he came out of the room after a long 15-hour day and he was very stressed about money. He didn't say, "You're not making money." He was just like, "I'm stressed about money." But because I am very like aware, I had all this inside just churning in me that I was like trying to sit with, like you were just mentioning, where my mind was just like, "Oh, I feel like a piece of shit right now because I'm not contributing and to our financial situation and he's very stressed. This is my fault. He thinks I'm a bad wife. Maybe I am a bad wife. Maybe I'm a bad person." And but I sat with it for a while, but then like the next day, I can't remember what happened, but I just was so frustrated with him and not realizing like it's just this thing that I was sitting with. And eventually we did have a conversation about it, and mostly what I wanted to say was like, or what I got around to saying after I could like work through this in my head, and journal and all the things, was I'm so grateful for how hard you're working. Like I'm so grateful that you're taking care of the family. And would you tell me if me just working on my creative stuff and not making money for a while, if that was upsetting you, or if that's not what we like, could we just talk about it? He's like, "Oh, for sure. I want you to be doing what you're doing. I'm so happy that you're writing and I'm so happy that you're doing it." And all the things that I made up, all I had to do was ask.
Yeah, exactly. That's so okay. That's a two more very important answers to Max's question. One is figure out what your judgment is and figure out what the question underneath it is, right? So this is part of this
Yeah,
practice.
and
Like,
I remember you taught me that. You're like,
yeah,
there's an unanswered question that you want the answer
yeah,
to.
right. So your question is like, like, does Andrew want me to contribute? Is he pissed that I'm not contributing? Do I suck for not contributing? Right. And just ask plainly, right? Like that is really powerful and also decreases the emotional upset, because the emotional upset is something affirmative. It's like either yes, I'm awesome, or no, I suck. Right. So you want to spend more time in the uncertainty. And then another thing is focusing on specifics, right? Like you were very specifically like, do you want me to make money right now?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, oh my God, like, either defending yourself and being like, you said it was fine that I did this. Like, why are you worried about, we're fine. We have, showing the bank account or whatever things you do to try and like make him feel differently. Right. You focus on a specific thing. You asked a question. Perfect.
What would I have done without you? I say this all the time. I know you spoke a little bit about this before, but maybe just a brief answer, because I really want to make sure that we get this one. Olga says, "How can we make our partners seen and heard while also making sure our needs are met?" And I know we discussed this a little bit, but maybe a little bit more specific guidance in this question.
Yeah, this is like one of the big questions of relationship, um, relationship function and success. Uh, I don't know that I can answer this that briefly. The thing, like in this format, because it would be a lot of it probably is person specific to their relationship. However, one very practical answer to this is dealing with things separately from each other, right? So what I mean by that is like it'll be like I'll go back to the needy and distant example, right? It's like those two things then intertwine with each other, right? I'm needy because you're distant, and I'm distant because you're needy, right? In reality, whatever difficulty you have with those things needs to actually be dealt with as two separate things, right? So it's like, what is it like for you to be a person where where you feel like you're struggling with feeling like disconnected, or you get scared when it sounds like it feels like I'm pulling away from you, where you feel like you need a lot of reassurance, but it's scary to ask for it or whatever. What is the challenge of that? And how can we address that? And working with that as its own thing, and then separating it from what is it like to be a person who feels consumed and trapped and is worried about being pulled in and not having their own selfhood and not having their own autonomy and whatever, and dealing with that as its own thing. They're obviously related to each other, but functionally you can't deal with them at the same time. There's no way to do that, right? So we can acknowledge, like, obviously when I get needy, you want to get more distant. When you get more distant, I want to get more needy. But actually dealing with them, and especially if we're talking about being heard, they have to be separated from each other. One person just has to table their thing and have a structure where we know that both people are going to get their chance.
That is so, so good. That's such great advice because and I think earlier in this interview you were talking about, or this conversation you were talking about, how sometimes we don't even realize when we're being dismissive, and one of those things is like bringing it back to me. And so when your partner is saying or really needs to be heard, and you're like, yeah, but how about this when I need this? It's hard to move from there. So but having the upfront agreement that, hey, like today we're going to talk about this, maybe tomorrow, or when we call Aaron, we're going to talk about this or whatever,
Yeah.
is so helpful.
Well, another thing is like, even for the amount of time that I've been like working on myself, like I will feel something and not really know what's going on with me, right? Like I'll feel upset about something and I'll think it's one thing. And if Liz doesn't give me the space to sort of like work through that out loud to her or with myself or whatever, like I won't even get to the thing where I know what I'm trying to be heard about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how is she going to hear me? Right. So you have to be like, actually investigate yourself and be like, what is actually going on with me? And B, you have to give your partner the space to actually go down that road and say the thing that might not be it 3 or 4 times. You're like, well, why does that matter? Why does that matter? Right. And actually be curious about their experience. And that will help them get clear about what they want to be heard. Because otherwise, even if you hear the first thing, right, like I really hear that you're stressed about money, right? But maybe Andrew's really like, I feel like a shitty provider because, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if he only gets to I'm worried about money, and you're like, yeah, I really hear you that you're worried about money, he's not actually going to feel heard because he didn't even get to the thing that really matters about it.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Okay. And then one more thing I want to touch on from this chat, and then we'll close it out here because we've been on for a while. Is that okay if we do
Yeah, great.
just
That's
touch on one
perfect.
more thing? Because so I think I've deciphered what has been happening in this chat, which is that one person, Abba, who is listening, thanks so much for being here. I think he generally has a sense that, well, he says love is a cocktail, like from science to uh, have us survive as humans. And I think
Hmm.
that there's been a couple people in the chat kind of having conversations with him, like, hey, I hope you find, or like, because has this outlook on love that, and maybe is he's communicating that it's not for him. So
Hmm.
what would you?
I would say he's right. I mean, this is the thing, is nothing is one thing, right? I mean, it's there's different, like, I hate the word layers. This is such a new agey thing, but we can think about it differently than like there's layers, and just be like, there is our biology, right, which is different than our sense of self, right? A lot of people think our sense of self, right, and our, so this is called phenomenology, right, our experience of our inner world is an illusion. Nevertheless, it's very real to us in the moment. So yeah, absolutely. Love biologically, I think the clearest understanding we have about it is it's a survival mechanism, right? It attaches us to first our parents, because human infants can absolutely not survive on their own. It attaches them to us, and then later it attaches us to a mate to collaborate with, to do life with. I think that's absolutely true. That also doesn't mean that our inner phenomenological, or whatever you want to call it, experience of love isn't different than that and additional to that, right? Or our emotional experience of love, or the meaning we make of love, right? So it's sort of like, where does one thing end and the other thing begin, right? Oh, and then there's also people that think love is something very cosmic and spiritual, right? That's not necessarily where I go with it, but the point is that, like, yes, and it's hard to know where one thing begins and the other thing ends. Like, it just feels very reductive to say that. And so then you go, okay, well, what do you do with that, right? Okay, cool, you're right about that. So does that mean you want to be alone? Okay, try out being alone and see how that feels for you. I'm pretty sure that you're going to feel some sort of pang of loneliness and draw toward a relationship at some point, also biologically, because that is the function of love. And so then what do you do with that when you feel like you can't sustain the distance anymore? Right. So it's kind of, it's like, sure, I don't know, if you're someone who actually can sustainably be alone, cool. If that's what you want, like, live your life, right? But for most people, that's not actually that's not the conclusion and function of what we come to when we say love is a biological sort of like evolution mechanism. We then go to, well, that what that means is we're attached and attracted to each other. How do we deal with that successfully?
All right. Thank you so much, Aaron. It's such a, I could talk to you forever. And I hope that, I hope that answer was, I hope you're still here. And that answer was, it's so good. And I think that there's, so many times when talking to friends or with you, I think that there is this inner, I know these words, they can be very annoying, but like, when you ask yourself, like, is this what I want? Like, is being alone what, like, because you're like, try that. And then if it doesn't, I mean, like, there's this yearning or this knowing or this something. I just think that if it's calling to you, I mean, even in this chat, like, there's people who are just reaching out and wanting to connect with you. So thanks so much for watching, all of you guys. And is there anything else that you want to say or
Yeah,
point people to?
I just want a real quick comment on your last point, which is, for me, it's a question of sustainability, right? Like is, when I said the compatibility thing, it's like, I'm bailing out on this, I'm going to find someone and keep finding someone and keep bailing out on that. Is that a sustainable well-being thing? Or is it not? Is being alone a sustainable well-being thing, or is it not? Like, I really view it as like being a detective of yourself, and really figuring out what creates sustainable well-being for you, because so many things create in the moment well-being. A lot of them end up being harmful in the long run, like, substances as a prime example. They can damage things. I'm not anti-substances, I'm just giving an example, right? So just look toward yourself, of like, that should be a question you're asking yourself, is what is going to sustainably create more well-being for me, as opposed to something that I'm going to kind of get a hit of and then have to recover from and whatever, which is a much more suffering journey. So that's my closing thought for you. And yeah, I mean, if you want to pay attention to what I'm doing, Facebook is the best way. My personal Facebook is Aaron F. Steinberg. But my professional Facebook is Aaron FS, and the / thing is Aaron FS Education. And I'd love for you to follow me. And I'm going to start becoming a lot more public. At this point in my career, I've been very private. I don't like marketing myself, and I don't like talking about myself, and I just kind of put out videos here and there. But I kind of have turned a corner and want to make sure that if people can benefit from what I'm doing, that it's more accessible than just happening in my office. So there's going to be more coming soon.
Great. Well, I love talking about you and I love sharing you with everybody. So,
Thank you.
and I'm so excited, and all of our friends are always like, we need more of Erin. So it's so great to hear that you're going to have so many ways that people can access you and consume your content and love on you, get your ideas. Thank you so much, Erin. I so appreciate you. Thank you guys for being in the chat. Mitch, Kate, Brace, what's up, girl? Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you, Christy. It's